I drove up the long, palm-lined lane slower than I'd meant to, as if by easing my speed I could press pause on the things I'd been rushing toward my whole life. The Phoenician loomed like a softened monument. Marble glowed. Chandeliers winked. I smoothed my tie twice and thought of Anne. How she would have laughed if she saw me fussing at 63. Today was supposed to be simple. A son's wedding. A family held together for a few hours of light. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a story like this one. I walked into the lobby and caught sight of Daniel before he saw me. He stood at the top of the staircase in his suit, that boy-to-man face made new by a nervous grin. He looks like the man I wanted him to be, I thought, and the thought both steadied and unraveled me. Weddings make you perform hope like it's a garment you don and expect it to fit. The ceremony was small, perfect for Daniel, friends from his office, a scattering of college faces, and Lena, who moved through the room like she already owned the light. She was striking, yes, but there was a wire in the carriage of her jaw I didn't like, something mechanical in the way she smiled. I told myself men in my seat read danger in everything. Still, there was a moment before the vows when I saw her arguing with the two older people at her table. A harsh whisper, a gloved hand slammed into a palm. I dismissed it as nerves until later, when she stopped at my side with that same set jaw. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. Up close, her eyes held a message, sharp, certain. "Buy us a house, Mr. Mercer. Paradise Valley, full payment, or I tell Daniel what you did." The world narrowed to the shape of her mouth. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though the words sounded thin even to me. "You know," she said, voice low and lethal, "the woman you left, the letters, the lie your family buried so cleanly." She tapped the side of her head as if to say, "Don't play naive with me. You'll do the decent thing, or you won't, and I'll make sure the whole room believes what I say." A laugh caught in my throat, offended and surprised by how raw it sounded. I have kept a lifetime of secrets like a man carries a scar. I never expected them to be brandished like a bargaining chip in a wedding foyer. My fingers wanted my wallet. My instinct told me to bargain. But this was different. She wasn't demanding cash like a thief. She was dangling history. "What truth?" I asked, though some small part of me already knew the shape of what she implied. A woman's name from my past, Marissa, rose like a grim tide at the back of my mind. The accident that pulled me away, the letters I'd hidden in a box I'd never opened in 28 years, the promises I'd never fulfilled. She smiled thinly. "Tell me you'll help with the down payment, or I tell Daniel I'm carrying your child." Her words hit me like cold glass. I felt something shift in Daniel when she spoke to me, not understanding at first, then the brief, bright interest that comes before a light goes out. My son deserves the honest version of me, I thought, but the honest version sits with regret and mistakes he will not love. I walked away then because staying would have been a confession in front of the wrong people. I walked backward into the noise of pre-ceremony, chatter and orchestra strings and pretended decency, while my chest tightened into a fist I could not unclench. That night, in the car with the wedding lights receding behind me, I unlocked the glove compartment where the old letters should have been. My hand closed on nothing but dust and the cold, clean plastic of an insurance card. The locked box with Marissa's handwriting had been moved years before. By me, by necessity or cowardice, I could not say. And now someone else had found a way to drag the past up the aisle. I knew two things with a clarity that steadied me like a plank in rough water. Lena believed she had leverage, and if she used it, Daniel would never look at me the same way again. The wound in me that had been quiet for decades flared to life. I had a choice. Pay to bury the moment, or expose the truth and let the consequences fall where they may. Neither option felt like mercy. I left the Phoenician before the vows finished, because staying felt like agreeing to be rearranged. The drive home was a quiet march under streetlights, my hands more awake than my thoughts. Lena's words kept replaying, sharp as a blade. Buy us a house, or I tell Daniel what you did. They were precise, rehearsed, and dangerous. At my kitchen table, I lit a lamp and unlocked the brass box I'd avoided for years. The smell of old paper breathed out as I opened it, Marissa's handwriting, slanted and urgent, stacking like evidence of a life I'd tried to close. I touched the top letter and felt decades slip under my skin. The plan I'd made years ago, the call that pulled me away, the silence that had followed, all came rushing back in staccato fragments. Lena didn't ask for money the way a thief would. She wanted leverage, history parceled into a bargaining chip. If she believed I'd abandoned a woman and a child, she'd paint me as a coward and a liar in front of my son. Daniel deserves the truth from me, I thought, not from someone who thinks scandal can be purchased. I could pay. I could buy a house and bury the moment under tiles and curtains. But what does money do to guilt? It doesn't dissolve it. It dresses it for a parade. I closed the box and sat with the decision like a weight on my chest. If I confessed, I would have to let out the story I'd hidden, not to protect myself, but because I thought it spared others pain. If I refused, Lena might ruin what little trust Daniel still had for me. I sent Daniel a short message, "Call me when you can," and watched the little gray bubble float away. Later that night, I sat on the porch until the streetlights blinked low, thinking about how some debts are paid in words, not in dollars. Lena had started something I could not ignore. I had to choose whether to defend my reputation or finally be honest. Neither path felt easy. Both would leave marks. I returned to the venue the next morning, not because I wanted to, but because leaving things unfinished has a way of chewing through a man's sleep. The grounds crew was clearing the last of the floral arches, and the silence felt heavier than the music from the night before. I kept replaying Lena's words, her certainty, the way she spoke as if I'd broken a pact I never knew existed. Inside the ballroom, the smell of wilted roses lingered. I walked slowly, studying the empty chairs, the champagne flutes, the space where my son had stood, smiling, like his whole life was finally aligning. I wanted that moment back, not for me, but for him, for the version of our relationship that hadn't been poisoned yet. Near the far wall, I found a photograph someone had dropped, Daniel and Lena, caught mid-laugh, but behind them, blurred, was a face I recognized instantly, a man I hadn't seen in over 30 years. He'd once warned me to stay away from Marissa. His name had faded from my memory, but his voice hadn't. He shouldn't have been at the wedding. I stepped outside, scanning the parking lot as though he might still be standing there. Instead, the only thing waiting for me was the small knot forming in my stomach, an old instinct telling me the past doesn't appear unless it intends to be reckoned with. I sat on a bench by the garden and let the cool morning sun settle over my shoulders. It was there, in that stillness, that the deeper truth pressed in. Lena wasn't speaking from rumor. Someone had fed her a story. Someone old enough to remember Marissa. Someone angry enough to twist what happened. And if that man from the photo was here, then whatever I'd run from decades ago had finally caught up. Not because I'd done wrong intentionally, but because silence ages into guilt when left unattended. Daniel called then, his voice tight, asking when we could talk. I told him, soon, though the word tasted uncertain. I couldn't face him yet, not until I understood why the ghosts of my past were suddenly taking seats at his wedding. I drove to the edge of town where the foothills began, the kind of place where people lived quietly enough to be forgotten, unless they wanted remembering. The man from the wedding photo, his name came back to me in pieces, Ralph Henley. He'd been Marissa's cousin, protective, suspicious, the sort of man who didn't bother with pleasantries when he thought someone didn't deserve them. His house looked the same as it had when I last saw it. Low roof, slanted porch, wind chimes made of old silverware. I knocked. The Ductor opened halfway, and Ralph stared at me with the dull surprise of someone seeing a ghost rise in daylight. I figured you'd show up, he muttered. I need answers, I said. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him, as if the truth shouldn't contaminate the air inside. His eyes drifted to the hills. Marissa talked about you for years, he said, right up until things got bad. My chest tightened. Bad how? He shook his head. Not my story to tell, but her daughter, she's getting married, right? The world tilted. Lena, I whispered. He gave a slow nod. I came to see if she'd found you. Thought maybe she deserved to know something her mother spent half her life carrying. The ground felt unsteady beneath me. Ralph, are you saying Lena is Marissa's child? His jaw tightened, and his silence spoke clearer than words. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, painful rush. He turned to leave, but paused. Marissa didn't hate you, Ray. She hated what she thought you chose. There's a difference. Then he walked back inside, shutting the door without looking back. I stood on his porch long after he'd gone, shaken by the weight of what I'd just heard. If Lena really was Marissa's daughter, then her anger wasn't greed. It was inheritance. A lifetime of believing I'd abandoned her mother. I drove home in a fog. Daniel called again, but I couldn't answer. Not yet. When I reached my house, I opened the old box again and stared at Marissa's letters. Not with guilt now, but with a piercing realization that Lena's threat wasn't just manipulation. It was history demanding to be heard. And God help me, I wasn't sure I was ready for the rest. I hadn't even finished setting my keys on the counter when the knock came, sharp, impatient. I opened the door to find Lena standing on my porch, as if she'd rehearsed her anger. Her makeup was smudged from the night before, but her eyes carried the same cold certainty that had cornered me at the wedding. You didn't call, she said, pushing past me into the house. You didn't agree, and now I'm done waiting. Lena, I said, closing the door behind us, this isn't a negotiation. It is, she shot back, because if you don't tell Daniel what you did to my mother, I will. Her voice cracked on the last word, and that crack told me more truth than her threats. She wasn't just angry. She was carrying a wound she didn't know how to set down. Sit, I said quietly. No, she answered, but her arms wrapped around herself. You could have saved her, Ray. She wanted a life with you. She told her parents she loved you. And then you vanished. You left her alone with a man who... She swallowed hard. You don't get to pretend you're innocent. Her words hit with a strange mix of accuracy and misunderstanding. I didn't vanish, I said. There were circumstances your mother never knew. Right, she said bitterly. Accidents. Excuses. My whole life I've heard those. Her bitterness wasn't greed now, it was grief with sharp edges, and for a moment I saw the child she must have been, angry at a world that never told her the whole story. Lena, I said slowly, what exactly did your mother tell you? She hesitated, that she begged you to run with her, that she waited at the river for hours, that you never came, that she saw you as a coward who chose comfort over her. My chest tightened. That wasn't what happened. Then why didn't you look for her later? Why didn't you fight for her? I didn't answer, because the truth lived inside letters I hadn't yet shown anyone. At that moment, my phone rang. Daniel. Lena's expression shifted. Fear, anger, something softer buried beneath. If he asks me, she whispered, I won't lie. He deserves to know who you really are. She left without another word, the screen door slamming behind her. I stood there listening to the echo fade. The pressure wasn't from her threat anymore. It was from the truth itself, pushing, rising, refusing to stay buried. And for the first time, I understood. Lena didn't want a house. She wanted justice for a story she only half understood. I waited until Lena's car disappeared down the road before I let myself sit. My legs felt unsteady, not from fear, but from the old ache of something long avoided finally demanding its due. I went to the desk, pulled out the brass key, and unlocked the wooden box with hands that felt older than my years. The letters were as I remembered, folded neatly, corners yellowed, a faint scent of river air clinging to the paper, as if Marissa had sealed them in a season that never changed. I lifted the first one and began reading slowly, afraid of how much I already knew, and how much I still feared learning. Ray, I can't stay here. They want me to marry someone I don't love, someone who scares me. My breath tightened. If you meet me tonight, we'll leave. If you don't, I'll think you chose safety over me. I remembered that night, the headlights, the sudden break, the collision, hours in a hospital bed with a morphine drip and a nurse who couldn't reach anyone because my parents were on a flight. And Anne, my friend then, was the only one who answered. I had no way to contact Marissa. By the time I recovered enough to try, she was gone. I opened the next letter. Ray, I waited for you. I stayed until the cold hurt my hands. I thought you changed your mind. The shame of it, of her believing I abandoned her, hit me with the same force it had decades ago. If she had written again, I never received it. The silence between us had been the soil where every misunderstanding grew. At the bottom of the box lay a letter I'd never dared open. My hands trembled as I slipped the flap. I'm leaving town. I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do. I told my parents it wasn't yours. I had to. They said they'd destroy your life if I didn't. I exhaled hard, the room tilting. So that was the truth Lena never knew. Lena didn't hate me. She hated a version of me that never existed. I placed the letters down carefully as if they were fragile bones. The clock ticked. My phone buzzed. Daniel again. I didn't answer. For the first time, I realized that telling the truth might not destroy my son, but keeping it hidden would. I didn't sleep that night. The letters lay spread across the table like a quiet confession, each one proving how much of Marissa's story had been twisted before it reached Lena. By sunrise, I knew I couldn't delay the confrontation any longer. If Lena wanted truth, I would give it to her, every word without fear. I drove to her apartment. She opened the door with an expression that wasn't anger this time, but exhaustion. A kind of bruised sadness lived behind her eyes. We're talking, I said. No threats, no money, just truth. She stepped aside and I entered. I handed her Marissa's final letter. She hesitated before unfolding it, as if touching the page might reopen an old wound. When she read the first line, her shoulders stiffened. By the last line, her hands were trembling. She lied to protect you? She whispered. No, I said. She was forced. Your grandparents controlled everything. When she found out she was pregnant, they threatened to destroy my life. She told them the child wasn't mine. Lena sank onto the couch. All my life I was told my mother was abandoned, that you walked away and left her with a child she never asked for. I never knew she was pregnant, I said. Your mother didn't get the chance to tell me. Slow tears formed in Lena's eyes, tears she tried to blink away. Then she said something that stopped my breath. I did a DNA test last year. I already knew you weren't my father. The room shifted around me. I never wanted money, she continued. I wanted answers. I wanted someone, anyone, to admit what happened to her. I thought if I pushed you hard enough, you'd finally confess to the damage you caused. I didn't cause it, I said softly, but I didn't fight hard enough to find her either. That's my burden. She nodded slowly, wrestling with grief that had lived in her for decades. My mother married the man her parents chose, she said. He wasn't kind. She always blamed herself for loving you. She thought that choosing you ruined her life. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. She didn't ruin anything, I said quietly. She was trying to survive a world that didn't give her choices. For the first time, Lena looked at me, not with hatred, but with recognition. Two people carrying different sides of the same broken story. But then her eyes hardened again. Daniel deserves the truth, she said. We can't hide this. I'm not hiding, I replied. I'm preparing. She nodded. Then prepare fast. Because your son is asking questions I don't know how to answer. My stomach tightened. The truth had surfaced. Now it was time to face Daniel. Daniel asked me to meet him at the hillside cafe overlooking the valley, the one where he used to study during college breaks. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting stiffly, fingers tapping the table in a rhythm that betrayed his nerves. He didn't stand when I approached. He didn't smile. He just stared. "Dad," he said, "Lena told me something, and I need you to tell me if it's true." His voice wasn't angry yet, just wounded. That hurt far more. I sat across from him, feeling the weight of every year between us. "What did she tell you?" "That you hurt her mother, that you abandoned her, that you lied to everyone about it." He swallowed hard. I didn't want to believe her, but she sounded so certain. "She's certain of a story she never had the full pieces to," I said quietly. "I never hurt her mother. I never left her by choice." Daniel leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Then why didn't you tell me any of this? Why do I have to hear it from my wife?" "Because shame ages into silence. Because I was trying to protect you from a pain that wasn't yours. Because I never learned how to be the father you needed." 1,000 answers rose, but only one made it out. "I was afraid," I said. He leaned back as if struck. "Afraid of what? Losing me?" "Yes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe murmured around us. The clinking of cups, the soft drone of conversation, a breeze pushing through the patio screens. Then Daniel's voice cracked. "Dad, do you know how many times I wished you'd just talk to me? Instead, I get pieces, fragments, secrets." "I'm trying now," I said. "I'm trying to fix what I broke." He shook his head. "Not everything can be fixed." Before I could respond, Lena walked in, eyes red, expression hollow. She looked at Daniel, then at me, and I saw the moment she realized she'd pushed too hard. "Daniel," she whispered, "I didn't mean to." He stood abruptly. "You two have been fighting over a past I never knew existed, and I'm in the middle without understanding any of it. I need space." "Daniel," I tried. But he was already walking out, shoulders rigid, the door closing behind him with a soft, final click. Lena sank into his empty chair, trembling. "I didn't want this," she said. "I just wanted someone to admit what happened to her." I looked at the seat Daniel left behind, the warmth fading from it. "This isn't your fault," I said. But the truth was cruel and simple. The past hadn't just returned. It had broken the present wide open. The evening settled heavy over my house, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel amplified. I hadn't heard from Daniel since he walked out of the cafe. His silence was sharper than any accusation. I sat in the living room with Marissa's letters spread across the coffee table, wondering where to begin when a car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't Daniel. It was Lena's father. He stepped out slowly, shoulders sagging under a weight I recognized, regret that had grown old. When I opened the door, he didn't speak. He just held out a folded envelope. "We should have told you years ago," he said, voice hoarse, "but we were too proud and too ashamed." I let him in. He sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tight. "Lena's mother," he began, "she didn't leave you because you abandoned her. We forced her. We threatened her. She was terrified of the life we were pushing her into, but we told her running with you would ruin us all." I stiffened. "She thought I chose not to show up. She waited for me." He nodded miserably. "We told her you backed out, that you'd changed your mind. When she became pregnant, we told her it was best to keep you out of it. We were wrong. About everything." The room felt smaller. Why come now? He looked toward the window, eyes shining. "Because Lena is repeating the same anger her mother carried, and you're carrying blame that was never yours." He slid the envelope across the table. "Marissa wrote this the year before she died. She left it for Lena, but she never gave it to her. Maybe she feared reopening the wound. Maybe she hoped the past would stay buried." My breath caught as I opened it. Marissa's handwriting flowed like a voice carried on memory. Ray never abandoned me. I left because I was scared. If my daughter ever finds this, tell her to forgive him. Tell her to forgive me. My eyes stung. The words blurred. When I looked up, Lena's father was watching me with something like apology carved into his face. Give this to my daughter, he said. Tell her the truth. She needs it. You both do. He stood, hands trembling. At the doorway he paused. And Ray, when you tell Daniel, tell him you stayed silent for love, not deceit. When he left, the house felt unbearably still. I held Marissa's final letter against my chest. The truth wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a bridge, one I needed to cross before I lost my son forever. Tomorrow I would face both Daniel and Lena, and I would tell them everything. I didn't sleep. I waited for morning like a man waiting for a verdict. At sunrise, I drove to Daniel's house with Marissa's last letter in my jacket pocket. My hands shook when I knocked, but the door opened before I could gather myself. Daniel stood there, tired, guarded, but not closed off. Behind him, Lena sat on the couch, her eyes swollen, her posture small. Grief had softened her, not erased, and her anger, but turned it into something quieter. I want to explain, I said. Daniel stepped aside, letting me in without a word. I sat across from them, and for the first time in decades, I didn't shield myself with excuses. Your mother, Marissa, I began, didn't leave because I abandoned her. I couldn't meet her the night she ran. I was in the hospital, an accident. By the time I recovered, she was gone. Her parents lied to her, lied to me, and lied to you, Lena. I handed Lena the letter. She read it slowly, her breath catching at the final lines. Her shoulders shook once, then again, as the truth settled into the spaces where anger used to live. She didn't blame you, she whispered. No, I said softly. She blamed herself, and she shouldn't have. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Dad, why didn't you tell me any of this? Because I thought the pain belonged to the past. I was wrong. Pain doesn't disappear just because you hide it. Lena wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, she murmured. I thought you destroyed her. I thought exposing you would give her justice. You wanted answers, I said. You deserved them. Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked. I'm angry, he said, but I'm not leaving. We fix this together. Something in my chest loosened, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Lena folded the letter and held it close, as if it were a piece of her mother she'd never had. Thank you, she said, voice trembling, for telling the truth. We sat there for a long time, the three of us, surrounded by silence that wasn't hostile anymore. It felt like the house was breathing with us. Before I left, Daniel hugged me. Not the quick, obligatory kind, the kind that says, this isn't over, but we're still here. Outside, the air was warm. Light filtered through the trees in thin, forgiving strands. For the first time in decades, the past wasn't chasing me. It was finally letting go, and I, slowly, steadily, was learning to let go of it too.